So I'm in Dayton, Ohio, and this is a city that's considered in the top 6 for most dangerous cities in the state of Ohio. Depending on what criteria you use, it's different numbers, but it lands in the top 6. So it's not one of the better cities as far as crime goes for the state of Ohio. It has a population around 135,000 that has been declining since its peak of 262,000 in the 1960s. So it has literally almost lost half of its population since the 1960s. It's 52% white, 36% black, 4% Hispanic, and 1% Asian. So it's still a pretty diverse city, not quite as diverse as like Cincinnati was, but it's still a really diverse city. The average age here is 34. Let's go down this road. The average age is 34, and 17% of the population, wow, that building, they should just tear that one down. That building that on the right there, that should just be tore down. So the average age is 34, and 17% of the adults are seniors. So another city that the average age is a little on the low side. They have a 48% home ownership rate here. Which is, it's pretty good. Anytime that they're close or above 50%, it's pretty good for a city to have that home ownership rate. And typically the higher the home ownership rate, the safer the city is. It's not always the case, but I mean, they could have, you know, a ton of apartments in one area that just bring the crime numbers up from just a couple neighborhoods. Guy waving me on. The average income here is $35,000 a year, which is really on the low side for a city of its size, and probably kind of explains some of the high levels of crime they have here. There's a 27% poverty rate. So over 1 in 4 of the people that live here live below the poverty line. And they have a 25% marriage rate, which is really on the low side. So people live here, they don't have a lot of money, they're not getting married. Although the home ownership is higher than a lot of cities, especially cities that are you know, bad cities. And 70% of the people that live here were either born in the state of Ohio or born here actually in Dayton and still live here. So that's pretty good that many of the people either are stuck here or like it enough to stay. Their top employer here is Premier Health Partners, and it employs over 14,000 people. So that's like 10% of the people that live here work all at the one place. Miss this light, the City of Dayton Transportation Center. That's a huge transportation center. So their homicides in 2019, it was 54. In 2020, it was 48. So their numbers actually were going down pre the summer of Floyd, and their murder rates were in the 34 to 38 range. That's a really high murder rate, 34 to 38. When you consider the city of Chicago, the murder rate is about 22. That was pre the summer of Floyd. And then it dropped to 30 in 2021, then up to 34, their murder rate, in 2022 and 2023. So their homicides were then 30 in 2021 and 34 in 2022. So their homicides are actually going down, even after the summer of Floyd, which is rare. There's a whole bunch of people right there living on that street corner. That's rare to have a city that the homicides went down since 2020, since pre-2020. And the murder rates have since been in the 21 to 25 range, which again, that's, they're better than they were, but they're still in the same levels. If you're going to use Chicago as the bad guy, they're still in that same range right there with Chicago. Their murder rates are. Their aggravated robberies are up 9%. Aggravated assaults are up 3%. Shootings into homes. This is a stat that they actually keep track of here. Shootings into homes. So basically drive-bys, I guess, is what they're calling them, but they're calling it shootings into homes, up 29%. That's a huge increase of people getting shot while they're sitting in their house, or their house getting shot up while they're sitting in it. The violent crime here is 217% higher than the national average. So around 100%, the upper 80s and 90s, that's what I consider regular city bad. When you start getting into the 200s, then you start getting into that iffier territory. And when you start getting, well, there are a lot of people that just look depressed and bored sitting on the sides of these roads here. When you start getting up like the upper 2s and into the 3s, 300% worse, then you're into like really bad areas. So right now, I would consider this in the iffy category as far as, safety-wise, as far as violent crime goes. Their property crime is 119% worse than the national average. So again, worse than regular city bad, but not, overly where it's too bad. I mean, you expect a certain amount of crime when you live in a city. When you live in city limits, you expect a certain level of crime that you're just going to have to deal with and be okay with, just because it's a city. But when the number starts getting too high, that's where it starts getting a little worrisome. Your odds of becoming a victim of a crime here is 1 in 19. Of a violent crime, that was of any crime at all, 1 in 19. Of a violent crime, 1 in 86, and of a property crime, 1 in 24. So 1 in 86, it's still a pretty high number. I mean, there's some cities that it's like 1 in 30, 1 in 40, where it's like, if you go there, be prepared to become a victim. But the 1 in 86, that's not too bad for violent crime. And their year-over-year crime is showing an increase of 18%. So although their numbers aren't that bad, if you're recording a year-over-year crime of 18% increase, you're not far from things just getting out of control. And if they're showing an increase when in today's America, half the cities don't, well, I shouldn't say half, 20% of the cities don't report their crime data to the FBI. So those numbers are all skewed. half the crimes aren't even being reported. And the ones that are, the cops don't even do anything about. Certain theft levels, cops don't do anything about it. Certain assaults and stuff, they just don't do anything about them. They don't deem them bad enough to even do anything about them. What's this, center field? Dayton must have a minor league team here. When the cops aren't, and they're not, maybe they're getting reported, but no charges are being filed against most crimes anymore. So if you're showing an 18% increase and you know the city's likely not reporting everything or charging every crime, or even having the cops go out to even like take a report on the crime, an 18% increase is huge. The cost of living is better than the national average, and housing is 51% lower than the national average, which explains the 48% homeownership. But if your housing price is 51% lower than the national average, that homeownership should be closer to like 60%. But the people, the average income here, what was it, like 35,000? The average income, yeah, 35,000 the average income here is. So that's the only reason it explains why the home ownership isn't higher. If more people made a little more money here, that home ownership rate would be a lot higher. So as far as their schools go, the state of Ohio is one of the better states as far as this is. Look at all this graffiti. I don't know if you can see all that on the side. There's graffiti, people living right there. A lot of graffiti through here, and garbage. That must be a tent city back behind that fence. But so the city or the state of Ohio is really good with their schooling. 61%, I mean, obviously this number, 61% of the kids graduate proficient at reading and math. It doesn't sound like a big number. It should be 90% to 100%. In America, nobody's learning anything anymore. But Ohio is good with 61% of their students graduating at a 12th grade level. So here in Dayton, only 40% graduate proficient at reading and math. So even that, as low as that number is, it's better than a lot of the U.S. cities. 40%, it sounds bad, but it's better than so many of these cities. You know, the U.S. as an average, across the country, only 48% of the kids graduate, you know, being able to read and write or read and do math at a 12th grade level. So less than half in the country. Ohio is good, but you know, 40% here in Dayton. It's not horrible. A lot of cities are worse, but if the crime keeps increasing, you know, the fact that kids are leaving school and not being able to get a job because they can't read or do math or even, you know, count back change to work at McDonald's, that's, you know, they're not going to be able to get a good job. And that's going to increase the crime, increase the poverty, the people living below the poverty rate. And it's just not a good sign for a city. 79% of the people that live here completed the 8th grade. So 21% didn't even, 21%, 1 in 5, did not even go to enough school to complete 8th grade. 1 in 5 that live here. And 78% completed high school. These aren't huge numbers. You know, you'd like to think this is America, everybody's graduating, or the number would be 90%. That would be unacceptable. I would think, okay, that's acceptable. Some people just drop out, things happen, they can't finish, whatever. But 78% is really low. So if you take 40% of the 78% that actually completed high school, that makes 31% of the population here. 31% can read and do math at a 12th grade level. Less than 1 in 3 of the people that live here can do math and read at a 12th grade level. And when the city's complaining that the crime is really high, I mean, look right there. Less than 1 out of every 3 people. So those are the people that are working. The rest of the people are on welfare or living below the poverty line on some, job like, whatever you can get that you don't actually have to read or, count back change in a store or something like that. There's some garbage here. Most of what we went through when we first went through the city, now we're leaving Dayton. So I'm going to cut this short here, but most of the city that we went through was relatively clean, and just the last few minutes had become where there was garbage and stuff on the street. But we're not in Dayton anymore, we're in Riverside. So I'm going to cut this out here, but I hope you liked that drive through Dayton, Ohio.